A man who made £1.2 million selling Class A drugs gloated about his luxury watches and designer clobber on social media. Luke Waters, who's 28, posted a snap of four high-end watches, including a Rolex, on Snapchat with a caption, 135k type of wrist, and then dubbed them his street trophies. He also posted pictures on Facebook holding wads of cash. But now Waters, who has been locked up for 10 years for dealing, has been ordered by a court to hand over nearly £200,000 of his ill-gotten gains to police, meaning he may have to sell them to comply with the order. Waters was busted after his secret phone messages to other dealers were cracked by detectives. Police found messages from Waters confirming the delivery of cocaine had landed in the UK and his offers to sell to other dealers for around £40,000 a key. Cambridgeshire police said Waters lived a very lavish lifestyle on the drug money, splashing the cash on designer clothing and Rolex watches worth tens of thousands of pounds each. Detectives also uncovered images on his mobile phone of what appeared to be Waters throwing a phone into the sea with the caption, "By Encro," after EncroChat had been decrypted by police. Waters was charged in December 2021 with supplying Class A drugs and acquiring criminal property. He pleaded guilty and was jailed for 10 years and 2 months. And now a judge at Cambridge Crown Court has ordered Waters, under the Proceeds of Crime Act, to hand over £176,000 within 3 months or face a further 3 years in prison. Police have already seized £48,000 and Waters is said to have assets totaling just over £225,000. It's believed if he can't cop up the cash, Waters will have to sell his street trophies to pay the order. Detective Constable Andy McDonald said the investigation began in 2020, which saw data uncovered following the seizure of servers linked to EncroChat platform, an encryption tool used exclusively by criminals to communicate with each other. Contained an abundance of evidence proving Waters generated significant amounts of money through the sale of drugs, as well as purchasing high-value items, including designer clothing and Rolex watches worth tens of thousands of pounds. Waters' criminal business benefited him to the tune of £1.2 million, while he has only been ordered to pay the remaining hidden assets of £176,000. The full benefit figure will remain with him for life, meaning he will be liable to have any future assets confiscated if suitable. Half the money is going to be going to the government, people and housing benefit, and the remaining is then split equally between the CPS, His Majesty's Crown Court, and the police. So guys, this is a new story coming in, absolute madness. And in another next news story, 3 men and a woman have been sentenced following the death of an innocent man who was stabbed whilst intervening in a fight. Sidney Anthony Palmer, known to his friends as Sid, sustained a single stab wound and died shortly after in hospital on the evening of Saturday, 30th of September last year. At around 6:15, there was an altercation with Nathan Pritchard and another man in a street in Leicester. Shortly after, outside a store on London Road, Pritchard was punched by an unknown man who was believed to be acting on behalf of the man involved in the earlier altercation. At around 7 o'clock, Pritchard, again in another street, challenged the first man in the altercation and called one of his boys Michael Bollian, who threatened the man. Victor Edward Raja then received a call from Bollian and made his way to the scene. The prosecution believed he was instructed by Pritchard to attack an associate of the person he'd been arguing with. Raja, on arriving at the location, saw the man and a fight started with Raja violently punching him. Several people intervened, one of which was Sidney Palmer, who was not involved in it at all. He wasn't even involved in the wider incident, and he actually tried to act as a peacemaker, attempting to pull Raja away. However, CCTV showed Raja arming himself with a knife he was carrying and swinging towards Sidney, but missed. Immediately repeating this action, he struck Sidney to the chest with a single stab wound. All the defendants quickly legged it from the scene, and Sidney was taken to hospital, where he sadly died a short time later. Post-mortem examination later confirmed he died from the stab wound which had passed through his heart and lung. A murder investigation promptly commenced, and officers were able to track that Raja had taken a taxi and was dropped off. He was later picked up by his mother, Diana Bodrug, who drove him to Yorkshire and assisted in booking him under accommodation under false details and bought him a new phone and SIM card. Through extensive inquiries, Raja was traced to an address and arrested by armed officers in the early hours of Thursday, the 5th of October. After being interviewed by detectives where he made no comment to questions asked, 25-year-old Raja was charged with murder and remanded into custody. Michael Boylan from Leicester and Nathan Pritchard were charged the days after Sydney's death in conspiracy to cause GBH with intent. Following further investigation and work and consultation with the CPS, they were charged with further offences. Pritchard was charged with murder, while Boylan was charged with manslaughter. Diana Bodrug was charged with assisting an offender. Following a trial at Leicester Crown Court, which concluded a few months ago, the defendants were found guilty as follows. Rajal was found guilty of murder and possession of a bladed pointed article in a public place. Boylan was found guilty of manslaughter. At the beginning of the trial, Pritchard pleaded guilty to manslaughter and Bodrug pleaded guilty to assisting an offender. So at the same court, Rajal was sentenced to life imprisonment and ordered to serve a minimum of 25 years and 6 months before he is considered eligible for parole. Rajal's sentence also takes into consideration previous offences for possession of drugs and false identity documents. Boylan was sentenced to 8 years in prison and Pritchard was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Bodrug was sentenced to 2 years and 6 months in prison. Detective Chief Inspector Mark Sinsky, who was the senior investigating officer, said this was a tragic loss of a life of a popular man who was only trying to act as a peacemaker to actually stop the initial fight taking place. Sydney was well known. He was a loved man and his death, as understandably, had a devastating effect on his family and friends. CCTV of the incident clearly showed Raja swinging his arm holding a knife more than once at Sydney. This shows Raja's obvious intent to stab the person pulling him away. Our investigation moved at a fast pace to identify, trace and arrest all those responsible for Sydney's death and linked offences. This was a team effort with a significant number of our officers and staff working long hours and using their professional expertise to secure evidence to convict those involved. DCI Sinsky added, knife crime maims, kills and ruins lives, which is why it continues to remain an ongoing priority for the force. Our Lives Not Lives campaign has been running for several years and continues to be committed to reducing knife crime offences. And in another story, a man who stabbed his friend to death and broke into his ex-partner's home on a rampage aimed at settling scores has been found guilty of murder. Andrew Hall from Rochdale attacked his friend Jeffrey Ives at his home in Haywood armed with 2 knives. Mr. Ives was bleeding to death as Hall took a taxi to Middleton and smashed his way into his ex-partner's home before he was tackled by the woman's son. He was found guilty of murder and aggravated burglary at trial at Manchester Crown Court. He actually arrived at the victim's home at around 10 o'clock armed with 2 knives and stabbed the man he called his friend in the face and neck before setting off for his ex-partner's home. Armed with the same vegetable knife he used to kill the victim, Hall broke in but realised his ex-partner, who had a restraining order against him, was not home. He then threatened to hurt those inside with the murder weapon if they did not tell him where she was. Hall was then tackled by his ex-partner's son and restrained until police arrived. When arrested for aggravated burglary, he told officers that he'd been settling scores that night. Mr. Ives' body was discovered days later. I just want to say rest in peace to the victim. Our condolences go out to your family. But guys, there's a number of stories coming out from the streets of the UK. It's your boy GT. Keep it locked, keep it real.